Hey, welcome back to the number one podcast in the world, the Cellarcast. A mini episode, I think at least, 81. So, as I mentioned in the last episode, this is, I'm kind of just recording this because I want to keep parity with one episode per week, and I'm going to cheat by getting 2 episodes out back to back, but I kind of look at this as being more of a little bonus. Actually, hey, fun little thing, little detail I didn't even know when I was recording that because I hadn't uploaded it, but I got fiber optic Wi-Fi installed in my house the other day, and I hadn't really had a chance to use it for video uploading at least. Everything, excuse me, on the just regular usage side, it's pretty normal, but I got fiber optic and then replaced. I was using a 2.4 gigahertz Wi-Fi adapter on my PC. My PC did not come with like built-in Wi-Fi. Excuse me, I'm burping a bunch. So I had to throw in I had to buy a new Wi-Fi adapter that was compatible with 5 gigahertz. Turns out that the 2.4 gigahertz standard was actually bottlenecking my speeds. And it jumped from legitimately, I think I was getting like 40 down, 20 up. And that jumped to like 250 down, 200 up, or something insane like that. Just absolutely ridiculous. And usually, if I upload like a 2-hour podcast, it'll take like an hour at least, at least an hour and a half maybe, to upload. That was like a 2-hour, 40-minute podcast that took 20 minutes to upload. I could not believe it. So that makes my life a lot simpler, I guess, because I don't know. Whenever I start uploading, I don't want to like hog up any bandwidth, so I just kind of like lay really low in terms of usage. Don't do anything very intensive until it's done, but I guess it's not as much of an issue anymore. Well, this is pretty much just going to be like the idea of this is I thought it'd be fun to do a recap review of the 2022, the whole year of the channel, a little retrospect of, I guess, the main channel specifically, not this podcast channel. Oh, hey, this episode was me rambling about a bunch of shit for 2 hours. Well, this episode was me talking about a bunch of other shit for 2 hours. Ooh. I wanted to talk about the main channel, which I'm assuming everyone here came from that channel. Yeah, so 2022, I think overall was actually, I'm really happy. Like, I'm looking at the videos that came out in this year, or last year, and I'm actually really pleased with what I was able to do creatively. I'm very happy with kind of where I'm at. I guess I should talk with a little bit about how I went into that, into last year, which was with I was sort of, I think I've talked about this a little bit before, but when I started out the channel, and I actually started posting videos back in 2021, I was going on a weekly schedule, so I just pumped out a lot of videos, learned a lot, made a lot of mistakes, and such, and did a lot of experimenting. And the process of that was interesting because I started out with like a ton of ideas and things like that, and I just kind of started running through them. And towards the end towards like the middle of 2021, I really started to get very, toward the whole year of 2021, I was doing pretty much either weekly or bi-weekly uploads. I was really trying to put out as many videos as I could. I remember freaking in October putting out was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 videos, one of which was like the audiobook thing, but that was the first time I'd ever done that. And I was definitely stressing myself the heck out. It was very, very stressful for me to do, just because it was too fast. The problem was that I pretty much had no time for anything else. I would spend the entire week, every day, just working on videos, and then my weekend would be spent thinking about the next video and basically stressing about that. So I had no time to actually kind of relieve myself and just like actually chill out, and sort of process what was going on. It was just like go, 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 go. And I did that because I wanted to stick to a schedule. And then once I kind of had some videos under my belt, I felt a little more confident. I think in 2022, I was like, okay, this is where I'm making the cutoff, and I'm going to change things. I opened my Patreon, and I kind of see 2022 as being like the season 2 of the Cellar. I guess like 2020 and 2021 are like season 1 or season 0 plus 1. I don't know what you'd want to call it. The early parts of the series, where I think that at least like me mentally, 2022 was like a very like new slate, a new kind of beginning point in a lot of ways. Because one, well, I had the Patreon. Two, when I opened that Patreon, like 2 people immediately subscribed to it. I was very surprised by that. You guys are great. Two, I decided, okay, I'm gonna switch to a 2-week schedule, or yeah, pretty much like a 2 video a month schedule, because number one, I think that would be a lot healthier for me to not just be thinking about videos all the time. I'd at least have like probably 1 weekend in the middle, depending on how intense the project was. I would be able to, and importantly for me, I was a little frustrated because I felt like there were ideas during, I'll just call it the first season. Maybe I should make a playlist for them. I'll just make a playlist to divide them like that. I mean, I like making playlists. There were video ideas that I wanted to do that I just didn't have the time to, because when you have a week, that's honestly not a lot. Like, sometimes for the amount of work that goes into a single video, a week is not enough time to do, like, especially if it's about like a specific game, like playing the game, taking notes, depending on how long that is, actually getting my thoughts into like a coherent script, and then the actual editing process, which itself can take like at minimum 2 days. If it's an easy, like quick, just kind of banging out project, 2 days, maybe 3-4 days at most. That's for like the biggest things. And so like, yeah, I would do a schedule in like the first season where I would like Monday I basically did all my research and I would write the script. Mind you, I've never written a second draft of a script. Can you tell? I would do all the research or play the game or whatever it was. This is also why, first early videos were like very small in scale kind of games and stuff like that, and topics. Tuesday, I would like either finish the script and then at least get it recorded, and then Wednesday, Thursday, and I would upload on Friday. I would do all the editing, and that it was definitely intense. It was like a very I was definitely on it. I don't. Sometimes I'm like, I don't know how I did it. I think part of it was just the excitement, right? The excitement of doing something kind of new, because I grew up on YouTube, I wanted to do things. I've always, I don't know. It's always been a huge inspiration to me. It's been a huge like source of creative like thrust for me. And so actually sitting down and like, okay, I'm gonna actually start making YouTube videos and start expressing myself like this was very exciting and gratifying. And then, as most things go, eventually it becomes work. It's work that I enjoy, and it's work which I would say, well, I don't always enjoy the work, but I enjoy. I think this is an important distinction. Have I talked about this on the podcast? I might have, but I think it bears repeating. I don't always enjoy the work, honestly. Legitimately, I do not always enjoy the work of making videos, but I enjoy the product, and I like reading your comments, and I like interacting with you guys, and I like expressing myself. There's something deeply satisfying about being able to express how I'm feeling about something and my thoughts on things. I've always been bursting at the seams because I have way too much to say. You might have been able to tell if you're a regular listener of this podcast. Like the Modest Mouse lyric goes, opinions were like kittens. I was giving them away. I had a lot to say. So I want to take this episode to just kind of recap and look at, I think individually every video. I don't know how much I'll have to say about each of them individually, but I want to start out with the DieHard series. Actually, this is great because this is exactly what I was talking about. This was a concept. So where the DieHard series came from, and funny enough, I totally forgot there was a series of movies called Die Hard. So I tell people like, oh, I made these videos called Die Hard, and they're like, oh, like the action movie, like the Bruce Willis movies. I'm like, oh, I forgot those thing. I called it Die Hard because, Die Hard game fan and all that. The Die Hard series came from an early episode I did on Girls of Gaming, which was Dave Halverson's sort of, it was this annually published magazine. I think he did it for, I want to say 9 years, something like that. Like a lot longer than you would have expected. Maybe more like 7-8 years. And it was like this, that's an interesting video. It's definitely like in the earlier part of the series. So it's, a little rougher in terms of like the audio and the editing and stuff, but I think it's a funny video in a lot of ways, and I really enjoyed researching that topic. I probably am the foremost expert on Girls of Gaming now, besides the people who made it, as I am with a diehard game fan in general at this point. And what was so interesting about that was that, like, it's such a great sampler for who Dave Halverson is, because the first issue of Girls of Gaming is like very respectable. It's actually, you look at it and you think that it's going to be just kind of schlocky, cheesy sort of like, okay, it's just going to be titties and softcore porn and shit like that with video game characters. Okay, whatever. And then you actually like get into reading it, and it's actually a lot of very interesting interviews with like artists, and Dave is not the best interviewer. Like I think I said that in the video. He's not the best interviewer. He does not ask the best questions. His questions are not particularly interesting all the time, but it's a topic that we don't hear about much, and I think that was interesting. That like you could take something that we usually look at as being very like lowbrow and unsophisticated, but then you talk to the artists who make that, and it kind of like gives you a little bit of perspective on like, it's almost like a cultural thing. Like we very much dismiss eroticism and sexuality, but there's like very legitimate human element. It's a part of the human experience, and to some artists that's very important. Obviously some of them are just doing it because they like titties, but like there's, you talk to them and there's like a very real like craft and artsmanship to the way that they like depict the human form, and hearing about that is very interesting. It was also cool because in that video there was an interview I'd never seen before with Daisuke Ishiwatari, and I think that's a very obscure, interesting interview that maybe I should like just signal boost or something for like the Guilty Gear community, because it's very interesting. All this to say is that the first issue is actually quite respectable and really subverted my expectations, and every episode, every issue after that just devolved into exactly what you think it's going to be. Basically just an art book with a lot of titties. And to be honest, that's not the worst thing in the world. I don't care about, I'm not some prude. I I see a lot of artwork on the daily, let's say. Like I'm not like opposed to the idea of it, but what was so what made it interesting to me, and what made the arc and the story of that video so interesting, is that there was this downturn in this kind of this disappointment in like, whoa, this is actually a very legitimate, interesting piece of like artistic, just like a series of interviews about art on something that we don't usually get to hear about, and then it just evolves into very surface level TNA pretty much, and that I thought was in itself interesting, and also Dave Halverson being a closeted furry. So I through that I was like, I found out about this guy Dave Halverson because I like to, you know, dig into, okay, who made this and where did they come from, where'd they go. That led me down the rabbit hole of DieHard Game Fan and Gamers Republic and everything he did, and eventually that. I read this stuff, and I remember just looking at like the Hardcore Gamer 101 page, which was kind of like the Bible that I used for a lot of the Die Hard series. Like that was my source for so much. Shout out John Chapaniak for putting all that together. And I looked at that, and I was like, oh my god, this is bigger than I could have ever imagined. And I kind of gave some of the highlights, like, oh, he gave Sonic 06 like a 9 and stuff like that, but I didn't get into details because I hadn't researched the details yet. Very much like, okay, I'm gonna shelve this for later. And I was looking at it, and I was like, okay, at some point during that first season I was like, okay, I have to make a video on this guy. He's too interesting. It seems too wild, it's too crazy, and no one knows about this. It's so obscure. And it's at least like unless you were there, it's very obscure. You were there, and you were reading magazines, and specifically you were reading Game Fan. You probably didn't know about a lot of this stuff. So it's funny because I always thought of it as like, I think I just in my mind I called it, I have to do the Dave Halverson video. The Dave Halverson video, singular. And now obviously it turned into a lot more than that, and I think that's an interesting example of the way that videos can just really unfold during the research process, where it's like, wow, well actually there's a lot to say about here, and I think there's a comment on, I think part 4 or part 5, where someone goes like, every time I thought it was over, it just kept going. There just kept being more. There's just so much information. There was just so much that happened in this entire, I called it a saga in like the complete version or whatever, or the one of those, the playlist, something like that. I called it a saga because it really is like, it is a decade spanning journey with lots of people, lots of people going on different life paths, industry stuff happening, journalistic stuff, interpersonal drama. There's so much going on, and it's all, and the center of it all is this just guy who you just can't figure out. And that's what's so interesting about Dave, is that, and I think like the emotional core of the whole series kind of is that like Dave Halverson as a person is so mystifying. He's so strange, because you hear about all these stories, and because so much of the stuff is secondhand, and he rarely speaks himself on things that happened. He's given a couple interviews, he's given a couple statements, but so much of the information is all from other people who were around him. And so you're seeing him through all of these different perspectives, all these different lenses, different points of time. And you also add on like age on top of that. Like people's opinions of him changed as they got older and they got further away from the situation and things like that. And that's what makes it so interesting. It's like this kaleidoscope, this just set of crystals that you're seeing this one image refracted through a billion different ways. And it helps that he himself, like there's all these elements to him that you can glean from the way that people talk about him, from people who just hate his fucking guts to people who like have respect for him, to people who are like in the middle of like, hey, they didn't like this thing that he did, but like their time with him was really fun. Like you get that kind of thing, and they've never worked a job quite like it. And it's really what my goal was I said this at the end of like when I put them all together, I recorded a little segment, like a little bit of commentary, like post thoughts when I made the complete like DieHard like director's cut version, just the full like binge compilation video version of it, and I said what I, this was always the intent of the series, was that the viewer could walk away from that series thinking either that Dave it wasn't guaranteed what you were going to think about him. You could have some respect for him. You could think he was a total piece of shit. You could be somewhere in the middle. And I wanted people to be able to make their own decisions. To make their own decisions about that. And I think I was pretty successful. I'm actually very happy with how this turned out. There's definitely a lot of bashing, because I mean, like, he did shit that was inexcusable. He did stuff that was really scummy and amoral. I mean, fuck, like what? I don't care. Put another body on the fire for all I care, or something like that. Like, holy shit, dude. And then, you read these other interviews with him and you get this other sense that, like, he cares. And I wanted to definitely rag on him for, like, the bad stuff he did do, because I think he deserved it. And that's sort of my perspective, but which I'm kind of trying to impart in my videos. But a much larger part of my perspective would just be that, like, yeah, he's a complicated guy, and I wanted that to come through. Speaking on, like, some of the individual parts of the series itself, I just kind of got, like, in the background, I'm just sort of watching the first part back, and holy shit, is it already? No, okay, it's only like halfway done. I was like, how long have I been rambling? So the first part is like a little bit rough. Not really. It's the only part that I really went back and I changed when I did the DX version of the video. And the reason for that is a little embarrassing. So there's a little bit of funny sort of backstory. I can laugh about it. I hope you guys can laugh about it too. Well, number one, there's straight up just like a regular editing issue in that video, which is that there's a shot of Tim. Oh, I keep thinking Tim Willits. No. Who am I thinking of? Tim Lindquist. There's a shot of like Tim Lindquist, and I just accidentally had like new text layer just sitting in the frame, like the default what you get when you add a text layer in Premiere. And I was so pissed about that, because like I watched that video like 3 times over before I put it out. Like, honestly, the feeling of like relief and like, holy shit, because I'd had it built up in my head for so long before I made it. And just like the feeling of relief I had when I had just finished the video, I was like, damn, I think I just said to myself, like, holy shit, I can't believe it's done. I can't believe I finished it. And then I watched it back and I'm like, because I got a comment about it, someone asking like, hey, is this a bit? I was like, fuck, god damn it, I missed that. So that was one thing that I went back and I basically recreated that shot and just fixed it, basically. I re-edited it. I literally just got all the assets back and remade it. Thankfully, it was not a complex shot, so. I could do that. The second one is a little like, I cringe more at myself. So there was a person who was very important to the Game Fan story named Molly Patterson. You might remember her, because I cite her a lot. She is one of the people who was most talkative. She does a lot of. If you reached out to her, she's talked a lot about her experiences with Game Fan on various forums. She's done interviews. She did one with like Nintendo Life that I referenced a couple times throughout the video. Like she's very like she's a huge source of information. Now, Molly is a trans woman, and she came out as a woman in, I don't know exactly when, I couldn't find exactly when, but sometime after 2010. After or around 2010 was kind of like where I sort of figured she came out, and she started going as Molly. While she was working, obviously, at Game Fan back in the 90s, she was not Molly. And so throughout the video, the first part, I erroneously, accidentally referred to her by her dead name, which I felt very bad about as soon as so obviously because I was basically, so the way that I did the research for this series was that the first, when I talk about like how much like wanting to do projects that took more time, the first episode of Game Fan, the first week that I spent working on it was all research. It was all literally reading. It was all reading excuse me, the Hardcore Game Fan page that just compiled all the forum threads together. Just reading for like 4 to 5 hours a day and taking notes and trying to put things together and trying to understand who was who and what happened when, and maybe create some sort of a timeline. And so now you have to understand that like at Game Fan, people had a lot of pseudonyms. So obviously you had someone's real name, and then they also had pretty much everyone had at least one, sometimes more than one pseudonym that they would write under. Like, you know, Dave was like E Storm or something like that. And then you also have this added factor of, well, when people post on forums, they might have a different username, or they might have multiple different usernames. And I sort of like got it, and John Chapaniak did a pretty good job of like picking essentially one name for everyone, and pretty much sticking to it. But I was very confused until I sort of figured that out, and keeping track of who was who, because they would refer to each other by name. I don't think he didn't change the actual text, I believe, but he did change like, I guess the name of the person who was speaking, right? Like, they say this, like the dialogue, whatever. Their label in the dialogue overall. But he wouldn't really change the specific names of when they were speaking, like when they were actually in their writing. And so I had like a key. I literally had like a key in my notes of who was who, and like all the different names they went by. Just so that I could keep that straight, and obviously because those forum posts, I think the latest one is like 2007, but most of the activity happened in like the mid 2000s. So obviously Molly was being referred to by her dead name, and so that's like, I was like, okay, Shidoshi is this person. That's what I would do. I would be like, okay, who's the fuck another person? Like, Waka was this guy. Some stuff like that. Special K was K Kabuki. Holy shit. And then I in researching, this is really funny, and not really funny. So I referred to her by her dead name in the first video, because I literally didn't know. It wasn't there. And the... sorry, I lost my train of thought. The name Molly didn't show up until I clicked on like one of the source links, and this series was my life for like 4 months, and I knew what I had read these posts from these people so many times that I could like match what they said to who said it. Like, I knew it. And I saw something and I was like, didn't Shidoshi write that? But then I looked at the person who wrote it, and their profile was like, it just looked like a woman's profile. I don't know how to describe it. And I think specifically the username was like Molly Penn. And I was like, what? So I go to the profile and I'm like, huh? But yeah, no, because I double checked. I'm like, yeah, Shidoshi did say that, but Shidoshi's a guy. That's weird. And then I double checked. I look at their profile, see female. I'm like, that's weird. And then I see like formerly Shidoshi or something like that. And I was like, it just like, I had a moment where it clicked and I was like, oh no! Oops! Yikes! It wasn't anything done out of malice. It was just like it was just like a mistake, and I figured this out again during the research for the second episode. So in the second episode, I had a little disclaimer when I got to something that I was quoting from her, where I said, "Hey, just wanted to bring this up. I apologize. I think I used her dead name accidentally in the apology again, which is probably not a good idea, but I was like, hey, I apologize. There was no harm intended. Oopsies. It was, I don't know. It was just kind of an honest mistake. I felt really bad about that. And so when I made the DieHARD DX version, that was the other big edit that I made. Was in that first episode, I went and I re-recorded dialogue, and I actually went as far as to go back and like match up the background music so that it all blended seamlessly. So you could probably pull it up and you might be able to, if you just like listen to the lines where I say the name side by side, you might be able to tell, but you could probably, if like you really listen to like where my voice, if like there's a little cut where my voice is new. But yeah, I think I actually did a pretty decent job of replacing that. I felt really bad about that. But for the most part, it was that was kind of like the main thing. It was such a crazy story, and funny enough, in the middle of it, so I get bored very easily, and after doing the second part, I was like, I want to make a new video. Like, I want a little bit of a break from just thinking about the same thing. So that's why I made the Brad Stallion video, Soft Locks, Hard Cocks. I guess I'll talk about that after I finish talking about Die Hard, because I'll excuse me. I'll like whatever. Yeah, I want to talk about all this in one chunk. But that did like kind of interrupt it in the middle. Really, I just want to say that like when I completed the series, the comments that I got really touched me in a lot of ways. I was very surprised at some of the comments that I got from people who were really, did I say touched already? But this was like very neat to read like some thoughts from people. There was one comment from someone who I want to read this one little comment that really made me feel all tender, and this was very like, I'll just read it. There's a commenter who actually comments on this channel a bit, and they go by Rimjob Ledouche. Great name. And they wrote, "This was legitimately bittersweet. I have those exact Odin Sphere and Castlevania issues of play sitting not even 10 feet away from me at this exact moment. I was bullied horrendously growing up, and the feeling of isolation I grew up with was as constant as it was suffocating. Game Fan showed me early on that it was okay to love video games the way I did, that I wasn't just imagining FF6 hitting me as hard as it did as a 10-year-old in '94. I looked forward to every issue the same way a boy might be excited to see a favorite uncle. Your retrospective has given me a lot to think about in regards to the relationship between journalist and reader, specifically how Halverson flirted with authorial opacity and still managed to turn out a product as genuinely enjoyable as Game Fan was. Thank you kindly. You even managed to provide a small measure of closure for me." And that was like a really crazy comment to read, and it was very like legitimizing in a lot of ways, because I mean, when you do this, it's like people really, what I get out of out of making videos is that beyond just being able to express myself, there's like a two-way street to it, because I think that from a very young age, I always was able to relate. I had a very difficult time relating to other people when I was a kid, and I did not have a lot of friends when I was a young kid. I sort of started to make them in middle school, and some of those people are my best friends to this day. But as a young kid, like throughout elementary school, I was very lonely. And the way that I was able to relate to people who just like didn't really understand me or care to understand me. How did I do that little effect where I got the magnifying glass to work in part 5? It's so neat. Anyway, I totally forgot how I did that. That was such a cool effect. My way of relating to people was always by telling stories, and it was sort of like by making them laugh. I usually I like to be funny. I like to make people laugh, but it was really by being able to relate things that were happening in my life in like an entertaining, interesting way, and then eventually it became things that not just my life, but things that I was interested in, and that's kind of like a real hallmark of a lot of like my creative pursuits, is that I do these things because it kind of, I feel like it helps people understand me a little bit better, and it kind of I don't know, it sort of reaches out a little bit. So yeah, there's something satisfying about being able to express yourself, but there's also something equally or maybe more satisfying about being able to make yourself understood, which is maybe more important, and it's kind of like the cornerstone of communication, isn't it? And that's stories are a form of communication, and I think like if at least someone is able to get something out of something that I made, that to me it's almost like over 100%, right? Because if I'm able to communicate what I feel about something, and someone's able to at least get pretty much all of that, but then they're also able to infer something of their own that is not necessarily coming from me, but comes from the thing that I like. Fucking this experience from this comment, like this person's experience with GameFan and Play Magazine growing up, throughout their life, I can't relate to that in that specific way. Like, I didn't grow up with GameFan. I found out about it in, like a year ago. I was just talking about why I thought it was interesting. And for that person, I feel like maybe in some way, hey, maybe they're listening, they were at least able to, like, create more out of the stuff that even I was able to offer, that it sort of became like, I don't know if more than the sum of its parts was really correct, but yeah, that's, I feel like I'm getting, like, if you understand, if I'm able to properly explain something, I feel like, and you're able to understand that, that's like let's say 100%. But if you're able to take that and you get something greater out of it than was even coming from me, then in my mind that's like over 100%, if that makes sense. And it's like, that's one of the things that's really neat about art, is that it's like, oh boy, the lights are flickering. Hopefully the power doesn't go out. We've been having insane freaking storms on the West Coast last last week or so. It's what's cool about art is that it's like, it can have that effect where it's like free energy. It's like creating more than what was there initially. Yeah, like that's, oh god, the fucking lights. It's really interesting. God, I hope the fucking power doesn't go out. So yeah, that kind of a comment was very validating for what I do, because sometimes I have some insecurities about like, what the fuck am I doing? Like, what am I is this going anywhere? I kind of, I have to like kind of perk myself up and remember like, no, okay, I just got to keep going, and something's going to work out, and I think I have something valuable with what I do, and that's the kind of comment that really hits me in a special place like that very much makes me feel like what I'm doing is the right thing to be doing. Like, I could be making more money working like a minimum wage job or something, but the experience of being able to like have this kind of an effect on someone, even if it is very rare, it makes me feel like this is like a more substantial thing to be doing with my life, which is weird because I usually feel like art is very doesn't contribute to society. I just got done with talking about how it does, but what the fuck. Anyway, let's talk about soft locks, hard cocks. So this was a video that I made because I get very impatient, and it's very easy for me to get bored. Like, I can occupy myself easily with stuff. I will make myself busy, mind you. And this was an example of that, where I'd made the first two videos, and the first, like, that first week of, like, huge plunge into the DieHARD series was really, like, that was kind of the foundation for the first 3 videos of DieHARD. Like, there was not a ton of research that I had to do until I got to the 4th part. And I kind of, like, I kind of researched a little bit as I went along, because I fucking, the Hardcore Gamer page covers pretty much like 10 years. And it's like, okay, I can squeeze at least an episode or 2 out of this. Ended up being 3. And then I started really digging more into, like, everything that happened after that. But I was just sort of a little bored with making it. And so I needed a little break, a little palate cleanser, essentially. And I wanted to do something on weird porn games because I find them fascinating and funny. So there's like a couple, in like the first part of the video where there's just a few interesting ones, like that one. It's like a text-based sex simulator with Deanna Troi from Star Trek, I think. And that's sort of funny in like the 2 different sex Tetris parodies. That was just kind of like funny, weird stuff that I wanted to show off. And then that ended up being like just a little teaser. I was like, okay, I want to show these off, but I'll just work it into like the intro of the video. And then really, because the whole Brad Stallion series became because there were 4 games and I had a lot to talk about, I was like, okay, this is going to be like kind of the main part of the video. This is going to be the main topic of the video. I really like the intro I did for that one to make it look like a 70s kind of like sort of like a 70s like almost grindhouse, like low quality film intro. I really liked what I did for that. I got to use a Modest Mouse song. Not a whole lot to say about Brad Stallion, honestly, other than that it was it's definitely a series of games that banked on, it doesn't even really have that much nudity. Like, the nudity is so sparse. There's no actual sex. There is, but it's like glossed over. Like, there's no sex scenes. There's just like horrifying. All the women in the first 2 games look like they're made of like potato bread. Excuse me. I'm gonna sneeze. No, I'm not. It's just like really, it's like trying to do that sci-fi sex comedy thing incredibly unsuccessfully. And I mentioned it in the review, but like, is it a review? Yeah, I guess it's a review, whatever. It's a review of my experience and my thoughts on it. We'll just call it a review. It's an easy way. I think I categorized it as like a game deep dive on my playlists, but yeah. There's like an interview with one of the creators where he said, or like the owner, like the publisher or whatever, where he said that they were inspired by the movie Flesh Gordon, which is obviously a porn parody of Flash Gordon. But like, even just from watching the trailer, I could tell that like there's so much fucking effort put into this movie. Like the costuming, the sets, the special effects. It's obviously like stupid porn shit, but there's like a lot of legitimate effort. And I use that example of like, there's this stop motion animated like metal bug monster with like a sword, and it's actually kind of a cool looking monster. And like there's a fight scene where the main character is like a sword fight with this composited in character, and like the effort to even animate that, and then to composite it in, and then to film it in such a way where it like looks good is like so much more effort than was put into making any of those games. At least like the first, like they're so poorly, sloppily made. There's so many soft locks. There's so many things that don't make any sense. There's so many like it's so amateurish. As a text adventure, it's just like I sort of harped on like how many unique verbs you need, and the reason I did that, I don't know if I explained myself very clearly in that, but the reason I did was that like in a text adventure, you kind of want there to be like you don't want the tools or the options at your disposal to be so obscure and obtuse and cryptic. You want the player to at least understand basically what they're allowed to do, or be able to like intuit what they're allowed to do just using like logic of like what words can I use to interact with a thing. Like if you're going to be having them solving puzzles and overcoming certain obstacles and figuring stuff out, it's really important, I think, that you at least make that your ways of doing that clear. And one of the problems with these games is that they are not clear. It's there's so many unique verbs. It's like, okay, well, why can I only use this verb but not like a synonym of it to do the exact same thing? When there's like an earlier point where I do basically the same action, like what is it, like you get into the grav car or whatever in the early part of the first game, and then later on like you have to get into like a little ship, but you can't use the same, you can't like you can use get in, you have to use like ride thing or whatever, and it's like, why? Like what the fuck? And it's so poorly, like it doesn't feel tested, it's so amateurish, it's banking entirely off of being a novelty, and it just has like so little value. It has so little value as like a game. Those first two, the second, they're all bad in like their own ways. At least the first three games. Most of my complaints have been about the first three games, because the fourth game is weirdly way better. It's like actually kind of enjoyable. It's fine. The first three games are all bad in their own kind of unique ways. Like the first one, how did I describe it? I know the second one is just like laughably short. It's just like it's literally unfinished. Like there's that whole section where I talk about like there's literally an ending that was not properly programmed, so it just game overs you and you have to start over again. The first game is like you can beat the second game in like 5 minutes, probably less, honestly, probably like 3 minutes flat. If you know what you're doing. I should speedrun this game. The first game is just like weird and confusing because like the freaking which one of these had the terrible save system? Well, none of them have a real save system. It had like all this the first one was the one that had the broken checkpoint system where if you game overed, it would restart you at the point that you were at, but without the items you got from the previous like part of the game. So you were literally just soft locked and had to restart. The third game is just fucking broken in so many ways. It just does not function in so many ways. Like the oh god, that one room that literally like breaks the game if you try to go in. That one there's so many soft locks in there. There's literally like I'm doing exactly what the game needs me to do. Like I ate the beans and I fucking can't fart. Why? Like what was I still don't know what I was doing wrong there. If I was doing anything wrong. It just didn't work. It just refused to work. And then the hilarious twist of like, wait, because of the way that this game handles going to different locations, you can just punch in the correct coordinates. You can literally go straight to the end of the game. And I don't think you actually need anything. I think you can actually just go right from there. You might need like one item. But you can like definitely sequence break the game really easily. I gotta go to the bathroom. Alright, I'm back. What was I talking about? Brad Stallion. The fourth game is like significantly better, which was very strange because like, excuse me, I think I said there was like the only one that I couldn't find credits for, which was really weird because this is again something that you could be proud of that. You could be proud of that game. It's just it's like a real video game. Like there's a concept, there's a structure. It has like actual mechanics. It has a decent interface. It's a little awkward, like having to like click through all of the options in this. Like you could have slightly reorganized it, but for the most part, it's like whoa, it's actually interactable. That was one of my biggest complaints with the first three games. Is that like. The world is so hollow and empty and dead because you can't interact with anything except for the one thing you're meant to in like the entire area, like the entire section. You'll just go through screens and screens where you can't do anything to anything, and you can't even like examine stuff. You can't even look at it. The world just feels so dead and contrived. The fourth game is like the Sex Olympics. That's what it's called. Way better in that regard. Like it really feels like a real game. There's stuff that's actually kind of charming about it. Like I still like the animation of when you get in and out of the ship, and it's like a zip like a pants zipper zipping up and then down. Like oh okay, that's cute. The idea of like okay, there's actually like a goal. Like you're trying to go to different planets, and basically complete these challenges. So that you can have sex with these women. Which, like, I think I made a comment about, like, it's a little weird to, like, literally pin, or to, like, literally have sex with women be, like, it's like a literal trophy. But, like, the game is called Sex Olympics. Are you gonna write, like, a fucking feminist interpretation of Sex Olympics? I would feel like I would just be wasting my time doing that. This is obviously not thought through very hard. It's obviously not trying to make a statement. And whatever statement it does make is so, like, muddled and, like, weird. Not even weird, but just, like, there's just not much. It's like, I guess you could say it's sexist. Okay, whatever. It's sexist. It's also a significantly better game than all the first three games. I don't really care. Like, it's just not worth spending the energy on talking about. What did I do afterwards? What was the first video after the DieHard series. The Art of Shinkiro. It's all in the eyes. I am really happy with how this one turned out. I really like the intro. I think I maybe could have phrased myself a little bit better with the way that I described kind of Ryu's. Ryu is more exaggerated as a character. He's got these eyebrows. He's got his musculature is definitely a little more cartoony, a little more like it's a representation of someone's musculature rather than a what do I say? It's like an exaggeration of a musculature rather than a straight depiction of it, which Shinkiro's art is more so. I think I could have written that a little bit better in retrospect, but at the time I wasn't sure exactly how to tackle it. But I'm really proud of how this came out for the most part. Chapters. Did someone make chapters for this? Are these like auto-generated? I didn't make these. What the fuck? Yeah, these are all like auto-generated. What the heck? That's really strange. I did not have those. I don't know if I like having those. Can I edit that? Can I change that? That's a little... let's see. I've never actually set up automatic chapters. Nah, I don't really want automatic chapters on this video. I feel like that's just distracting and it's unnecessary. Yeah, I don't like having it into chapters. I don't mind key moments for just like whatever, but I don't like actually dividing the video up because I don't think you're supposed to watch it that way. Yeah, no, I think that there was a lot more I could have said about Shinkiro and his artwork. Mainly talking about like the Capcom stuff, but I was more interested in the SNK stuff. Like, this was definitely a video that I finished, and I was slightly disappointed in that I felt like I had way more to say, or that I could have said if I did more looking specifically into his later works. But I think for what it is, as like, for what I wanted to focus on and like kind of the foundations of his style, I'm pretty happy with how I was able, like what I was able to go over, and also like his influences and how I analyzed it. I like my analysis. I still like my analysis. And it was mainly like after you talk about kind of the basic kind of core elements of his style, a lot of it is like, so I wanted it to be like, okay, when I think about Shinkiro's artwork, the first thing that jumps out to me is his eyes. It's the way he draws eyes. I think I say that in the video. Because I'm like, okay, what is so magnetizing about it? What is so magnetizing about his work to me? And I realized that it's the way that he draws eyes. It all starts from there. I am immediately drawn to the character's eyes. And looking at that and using the eyes as like the center of, it's kind of like the main idea that the video goes back to. Like, I wanted to kind of tie a lot of the topics back into the way that he draws eyes and the intensity and the emotion and the humanity that he communicates in his artwork through the eyes as kind of like the common element between them. So I have like some analysis of that, of how he draws them. I have some different examples. His shading is very key to his style. Like, I love this image of Kyo that I did this whole breakdown of how he uses contrast between light and dark, and it's just the simplest image. It's just a character from the neck up looking at the camera, but because of the fact that it's like black and white with these very like like charcoal, like pencil looking blacks and whites, he's able to create, it's the simplest image, but there's so many layers. It has so much depth to it because of how he bounces between the light and the dark elements of like the background, Kyo's hair, his headband, his skin, his eyebrows, this kind of like weird like mascara that a lot of Shinkiro's characters just kind of end up having. Then like the whites of his eyes, the actual, cornea of his eyes. And like it's such a striking, and then also you have the fact that everything kind of gets sharper as you go in. It's such a simple, straightforward image that like if anyone else was doing it, it would be flat, right? This would just be a flat, like, it would just look like stock concept art. But when he does it, it's like, damn, like there's this depth to it. There's all these layers going on. Like it feels three-dimensional because of these elements of his style and how he uses just the most limited tools that he's given to create this kind of an image. It feels so dynamic, and like you look at Kyo and you're like, fuck, dude, that guy be staring. I don't know what I'm talking about. Yeah, and then kind of what a lot of my art videos kind of end up being, it's just me talking about specific. I kind of spend the first half talking about the the core elements of his style that I can identify, and then the rest of the video is just like pieces that I enjoy and that I want to pick out and sort of analyze. God, the cover of KOF 97. This is 97, right? Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's 97. With that I really go in depth on. I always get them confused. I'm pretty sure it's 97 because it's the conclusion to the Orochi arc, the Orochi saga. Like when I remember just looking at this image, and I loved looking at it the first time I saw it, just because of all these elements to it. Like the environment to me is like such a. I didn't quite harp on this as much in the video, but like the environment, I love the look of this just like urban, this dingy, dirty alley that all these characters are standing around in. Like it feels so heavy and real, with like the textures, the lighting, like fucking look at the shadow underneath the fire escape. It's incredible. And then I just remember looking at the characters, and I was like, everyone here is standing in a different way. And I think it started with like me noticing how Kyo was looking at Iori, and then like how Chris was just sort of standing off to the side. And then I sort of looking at like everyone's line of sight and where they're standing, how far apart they're standing, the directions they're facing, compared to where they're looking. It's there's so much, like you get so much out of that image simply from the way that he poses the characters. You can tell so much. There's such an atmosphere to this image. It's so fucking incredible. It's one of my favorites of his. This feels like, not a literal scene that's happened, but a representation of where all of these different characters are at and where they're going and who they are, going into this tournament that's going to be like the culmination of this crazy arc. So fucking good. So fucking good. Yeah, I have the bit about his same face syndrome, which he gets over, and yeah, his SNK art, oh my god. Especially that like middle, like after those first couple years where he kind of started to figure out, sort of refining his style, like, god damn, dude. I enjoy the stuff that he does for like Capcom now, but I wish that he did do a little more like individual, like smaller scale pieces rather than big ensembles, which a lot of his like inspirations are inspirations. He gets that a lot from his inspirations, these big ensemble, like movie poster kind of looking things. But just, stuff like that, just these sort of smaller scenes with like less characters and more focused on like this individual sort of emotion. This much more like key, it's like smaller, more intimate emotion, more intimate scenes. That's what I'm trying to say. Like that Metal Slug picture. I really love that from him. I love his SNK stuff. One of my honestly favorite thumbnails as well that I've ever done. And it's so simple. I didn't even do anything to it, but it was like I already knew when I was editing and when I was writing the script and when I was working on it, I was like, I think back to like when I even started the script, because I was looking through just a bunch of his art pieces to pick out ones that I wanted to talk about, and I saw the thumbnail, which is just the picture of Kyo, excuse me, just with his arm kind of covering most of his face, but his eyes are over his arm, and it's like I saw that, I was like, that's the thumbnail. I looked at it, I was like, that's gotta be it, because it's such a direct. It's exactly what I'm talking about. It's a cool pose. It's like dynamic. It's simple. It's just the black and white. But it's got those eyes. Like you look at that thumbnail and like you see his fucking eyes, and you look at the whole picture and then you read the title and it's like, oh, what's this? I think that's part of the reason that the video did so well. It's like that's just such a hard ass thumbnail, and I didn't do anything to it. I did zero editing. I was like, I just want to let the art speak for itself. Like I think that the art is powerful enough. It's more I hate using the word poignant. And poignant isn't the word that I mean, but like pointed. It makes enough of a statement. It's so simple, but it makes a big statement, which I think is also some of my favorite art pieces of his. Like I was just talking about that other picture of Kill. that I was like, this is exactly what it has to be. This gets across exactly what I want to the viewer. After that was make my video, the video game, the video. I had no idea what to call this thing, so I just kind of made like a dumb, silly title. This video, I feel like, is good. I actually probably like it, but my problem with it was that there's this editing mistake in like the last third of it that fucking kills me, and I'll ruin it for you if you like this video. It's the part where, actually no, it's not even the last part. It's the part where they're it's like the band guys, and it's where I make like the Vietnam like PTSD flashback joke with Seth. I didn't realize it was Seth Green. Wait, was it Seth Green or Tom? I always get them mixed up. Yeah, Seth Green. Seth Green is like the blonde guy, I think, and he's just fucking there. He's just sitting there, and I don't know if he even says anything. But like I made this joke about him because he just kind of zones out while he's talking. And then I fucked up because like I dragged like a different clip over it, and it ends up, it's supposed to be like holding on him doing that, and it just got fucked up. Basically, I put too many it fucked up the timing. It was supposed to be a lot snappier, and then I ended up there's literally a clip like from a different part of the video over top of that section that's just this weird abrupt cut that doesn't make any sense visually, and then it goes back to what it's supposed to be. I felt so embarrassed. Like, I cringed so hard, but I feel like there's actually a lot of funny jokes in that video. I actually really do love this joke where it's like the digital pictures offices. Yeah, the digital pictures offices circa 1995, and it's from like Tom Ditka's Football, and he's doing that big pep talk. He's like, we're gonna get out there, we're gonna win, and then everyone goes, yeah, like the triumphant music is playing, everyone's, yeah, and then just the hard cut to the company dying the next year. Oh man, that was a fun one. That video did not do good. The next video, Street Fighter V's Fiasco. I loved making this one. This is a story that I have found interesting for a long time. It's just this really funny, like, it's just exactly kind of what I like about doing this channel, is that shining a spotlight on these weird, obscure stories that are kind of niche and that people might not know, but that are really interesting, you know? And like Lupe Fiasco, like, this is a thing in the fighting game community. They're like, oh god, when fucking Lupe Fiasco beat Daigo in a Street Fighter V exhibition. It's such a curious, weird, you've got all these fun elements to it. It's like, you have the fighting game community, which is already pretty entertaining. Then you have the element of like a celebrity crossing over into it. And I think what helps is that Lupe is like very, Lupe is like, he actually cares. And he's actually like into it, right? He's into the scene and into the genre. And I think that makes it a little more interesting. He's not just showing up because he got paid. Like, he wanted to do this, and he actually respects Daigo a lot as a player. And that's kind of what makes this it adds an extra level of, like, a little bit extra layer to it, I guess. And then you have, like, yeah, this whole of, like, historically within the fighting game community, like, what that match meant, how it was like this tone setter. I called it like a bad omen, or like the subtitle in the title card is like that was an omen or something like that. There's all these bad omens for how Street Fighter V was going to start out. I loved including Woshige because it's so funny. There was like a Sajam video a weeks earlier, and he was talking about how the Woshige clip, the famous one, where Woshige is like wearing, in like his greatest downfall, like his greatest blunder that he's known for, that like has basically stained his career, of a very accomplished high-level Guilty Gear player, one of the best to ever touch the game. But it was just this one moment that basically changed his whole legacy. And the fact that he was wearing a Street Fighter V shirt, because that was only for devs, is so poetic it's literally like the setup to a tragedy. It's like a bad omen, because the game would launch later that year, or sorry, in the next year. That was at 2015, I believe. And the Washiga moment was 2015. The SF5 launched February 2016, and it's such a funny like tone setter. And it's also just, I don't know, it's one of those things. I love just sharing goofy, funny fighting game shit with people. Because that's one of those moments that like you don't have to really know about the community or anything specific to the game to understand what happened. And that's just like, I feel like that was such a great hook. And then the story itself of Daigo and Lupe is interesting. It's got like, yeah, I don't know, it's such a good video. Like there's so many good elements to it. When I say good video, I mean like just the concept. Like it's so, I'm surprised that there hadn't been a real video about it, like a real in-depth breakdown of it. I was inspired in many ways by a video that Brian F. did, where I forget which one it was, because I was actually trying to find it because I wanted to like quote him in my video, but I couldn't find him, so I just sort of like expressed a similar sentiment. I could not for the life of me find the video where he talked about the Daigo v Lupe match. And, but he did a breakdown of it, and okay, it's already an interesting story, but like the killer, like the cinch, right, of the whole thing is the way that it ends. It's the fact that Daigo lost because he made a mistake. And like, okay, so I was in like a Discord chat with two friends who don't play fighting games. One of them specifically like was it usually just gets interested in stuff that I talk about. The other one was like a bit of a harder sell. I think it was Shrew. You'd know her from the Megaman video. Shrew does not know anything really about fighting games beyond just really surface level, like outside knowledge. And I was telling her and another one of our friends this story about like what happened. And because I was telling them about like what the video was, because I was writing the script. I think I'd recorded it at that point. And so I'm talking about it, and her interest got piqued first when I mentioned like Lupe Fiasco. And I noticed like her eyebrows just raised on the call, and because obviously she knows who he is. And I'm like, okay, that's a good sign. That's a good sign. That someone who didn't know is now interested in the story. And as I'm telling it, and I don't go into like super in-depth as I do in the video when I was explaining this to them, but obviously, and I told them like the broad strokes of the match and all that. But when I got to the part, I explained like, you know, the differences between the different like dragon punches and such. And then I remember like the way I was telling it, I remember I could see the both of them getting pretty like decently interested. And then when I got to the part where I said like, you know, down to the I get to the moment, the last moment of the match. And I remember when I said, like, he did the wrong DP. He didn't have invulnerability, and he got hit by Lupe's jump in. He did the wrong DP because he didn't know about the change. I remember just watching Shrew just her reaction to it. Like, she was so engaged. And I was like, this is a good story. That element to it, that is like the core. That's the key of the whole story. Because like, there's already these interesting elements leading up to it, but the fact that it was this just tragic, honest mistake that Daigo was just not used to, he hadn't like gotten it worked into his brain to always do like medium DP, because he was just too used to every other Street Fighter, or mainly Street Fighter 4, which he'd been playing for like 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, like 7 years at that point. He's been playing this game for 7 years where it works this one way, and then suddenly they change it in the next game, and he's like, oh, he just got caught out. It's such a good story. It's such a good story. And I think I told it really effectively. I'm really happy with the way that I told the story. And it must have struck a nerve because of all people, Lupe fucking Fiasco commented on it. If you haven't watched that video, or if you haven't watched it since I like first uploaded it, go back and look at the comments. Because like 3 days after I uploaded it, it was already doing really well. Like for my channel, it got like 3,000 views in like a couple days. And then I see I get a comment, like, I was just about to go on a walk. I look at my phone, I got a new comment. And it's Lupe Fiasco. And I was like, what the fuck? And I check it, and like, no, it's like the verified. Excuse me. He has the musical symbol next to his thing. I go to the channel. It's legitimately Lupe fucking Fiasco watched my video on him versus Daigo. And he watched it, and he like got hurt by it. He wrote, "Wasn't fixed, wasn't rigged. I trained and I won. Period." I could not believe that. And it's crazy because, like, I don't know how you could watch that video and come away from it thinking that Daigo did zero sandbagging. Like, it's so obvious to everyone else who watches it. And I think partially, like, there was a lot of people in the comments, actually, who they're already, like, they know about fighting games and they're relatively, like, you know, knowledgeable, but they appreciated the way that I was actually able to break down the specifics of, like, how does Daigo, like, what mistakes does he kind of how does he kind of, you know, loosen up, and what's the differences between Daigo sandbagging and him going hard, like actually going legit and trying to win. Like, you know, there's certain mistakes that he would use, he would just start relying on certain options like parries and stuff like that. To just make these big crowd-pleasing moments and stuff like that. And there's people who, like, really appreciated that. And I think even, especially people who did not play fighting games, I think I read at least one or two comments that they appreciated how I was able to break that down. I wanted to break it down in, like, a layman's way so that if you don't play the genre, you can at least understand. So I think I was pretty successful, like, breaking down exactly, like, yeah, just, I mean, I don't know how you could look at how I analyzed it and say that Daigo did zero sandbagging. And what's funny is that, like, I feel like I actually was pretty fair to Lupe. And to be honest, and I really do believe this, at the time of that match, he's not bad. I genuinely think he's not bad. He's obviously into the genre. He's obviously into Street Fighter. There's points where I could tell, oh, he's used to Street Fighter 4, like that point where he gets like a crouching heavy punch, like he anti-airs Daigo, and then he goes for like an EXDP. That's a combo that like would work in SF4. But SF5 has a much more limited juggles in a lot of ways. And like, yeah, it just didn't work. It was just less open. You just can't do that into that move. So, like, obviously he knows what he's doing. It's just some of his experience isn't applying, and he's just he's like a beginner to intermediate player in that set. And he's playing like a solid beginner to intermediate Street Fighter game. The problem is that he's playing against Daigo fucking Umehara, who knows how to deal with this stuff. He knows how to get around fireballs. He knows how to space himself properly so that he can like work the ranges of his character in his favor. He knows how to exploit weaknesses. He knows how to just wait for his opponent to make mistakes and mash and just punish it and get a big ass combo. He knows how to anti-air. He knows how to do all these things. Clearly, and like that like whole second set or whatever, or the one part where Daigo like just goes hard in the paint and he just goes like 2-0, that's Daigo basically signaling to the audience that like, no, he knows what he's doing. He knows exactly. He could have done that pretty much the entire game, the entire set, and he didn't do it. And it's to put on a show, because I genuinely think like Daigo cares about the fighting game community, and he wanted to create the impression that like anyone can put up a fight, but ultimately the more skilled, experienced player is going to come out on top, which is true. Which is generally true in fighting games, right? It's just he made this mistake that ended up having almost the opposite message, that like all the legacy skill doesn't matter, that all your knowledge of fighting games doesn't matter. This is a game for amateurs, where amateurs can win, and it's just random, right? And Yeah, that was another strong. I think that was a good I think that really helped to fill out the video, the effect that it had on the community, which is still being felt. It's still being felt to this day if you're in the fighting game community, and you read a lot of the discussion around things like esports, around things like Street Fighter V. A lot of the discussion about SF6 is now looking at SF5. And a lot of the reasons that I'm so positive on this podcast about 6 is that I can see all these things that they're doing substantially better than they did with the launch of 5. 6 is so much more cohesive of a product at launch. 5 eventually, they worked it out around season 3. They really started working it into a game that has its own flavor and its own appeal. And I think that genuinely, in a few years' time, there will be an urge to go back to Street Fighter V for some people. The same way that there was an urge to go back to 4. For some people. It's not going to be everyone. It's probably going to be a minority of people. But 5 now, it's not just a worse version of 4. It's its own. It has its own feel. It has its own vibe. It has its own systems, and it's got some unique characters. And I think that's what sets it apart. They gave it an identity. I think 5 finally has an identity, which it did not have at launch. It was very misguided and directionless at the same time, in many, many ways, which is funny, but it sounds funny, but I think that's true. And 6 looks like they actually have a clear vision for what they want to do from the jump, and there's parts of it that are influenced by this being a spectator sport and stuff like that, but all of that stuff feels very secondary to making a game that's interesting. And it has interesting mechanics, and I'm going to stop talking because I could go on forever about all the stuff that I appreciate about 6 before it's even out. What was the video I did afterwards? Oh, it was the Brazilian Megaman comic. So a lot of people asked with this one about where do you even find this stuff? And I've been a fan of Megaman my entire life. Since I was a kid, one of the most influential videos that really got me into gaming as a craft, as an art form, was Ego Raptor's sequelitis on Mega Man X. Mega Man X versus Mega Man Classic. Those videos, that video specifically, was super, super influential. I already thought Mega Man was cool because I liked robots and sci-fi stuff. And I love the idea of you beat a boss and you get to steal their power and that. And that was always super rad to me. I've always loved highly themed characters. I mean, Mega Man might be the start of my love of highly themed characters. And so Mega Man's a very important part of my childhood, but my life in general, because it's I don't know, it's a big part of it's very near and dear to my heart as a series. And when you're really into something, well, you just kind of get familiar with all the weird stuff. You just kind of get familiar with lots of odd little, this exists kind of thing. And I've known about this forever, since I was a little kid. It's just one of those things. It's hey, there's a weird Brazilian Mega Man comic that's officially licensed, and it's not based on the games at all, and there's a bunch of weird nudity and violence, and it's just super off the rails. And it's just one of those things. It's this would be really interesting. And I honestly thought more people knew about it, but I guess that's just my biased, skewed perspective. I thought more people knew about it, but they apparently did not, because this was a big surprise to a lot of people. So I want to talk about one of the big inspirations for this video in particular. So what I wanted to do is I wanted to have a group reading of this comic book, because I thought it would be fun, and I wanted to get my first reaction to it, and my friends' reactions, and I wanted to riff on it. And a lot of that was inspired by this YouTube channel that I was a big fan of in high school, called Soot House. And so Soot House was what Soot House was that it was a group of these British friends, I believe, and basically what they would do is they would just get into like a Discord call, and then there would be a theme for the video that they were recording, and it would be like weird Yahoo Answers posts or weird WikiHow articles or something like that, or like guess what the WikiHow article is based off of the images. And then they would just kind of like go along and like riff, and there was the main guy who would host it, his name was Wilbur, and he would like send images, and then they would sort of riff on it, and then it was all edited together with like different colored, on just like a blank background, or like this sort of like gray background with like some animation or something. It was like a very like moderate amount of animation, just to have some motion on the screen, and then like images for like, you know, showing what they were reacting to and talking about, and then like the different colored text for each member, popping up as they would speak. I loved Soot House. Those videos were funny as shit. Back when I was in high school, like I want to say that, unfortunately, they were only active from like 16 to like 18, something like that. But their videos were great. I loved them, and they were decently popular too. And then suddenly they just stopped uploading, and it just sort of turns out, I don't know if there was any behind the scenes drama or something, but they all just kind of went their separate ways for the most part. And Wilbur is now a like Minecraft YouTuber. I think he does stuff with Dream. He's like Wilbur Soot now is what he goes by, and I was like, okay, well, I'm not really interested in that, but I loved Soot House. And so this video was like those parts of like the live reading parts of the Megaman comic, like 2-parter, was heavily inspired by it's like literally me riffing on their style pretty much. And I was actually really happy with how that turned out. I wanted to get more people in, but in our little friend group, there was just like people who had like busy schedules. People were just going through stuff, and they couldn't be around, and they were doing stuff, couldn't be around, and it ended up with me, Kat, and Shrew, and then later our friend Will joined after Shrew left or had to go to bed. And but I'm really happy with how it ended up. I think that excuse me, I don't usually like doing 2-parters because the drop-off excuse me, the drop-off is like insane in viewership for the most part, and there is a little bit of a drop-off, but not as much, actually, not as much as I was sort of expecting. The first episode has like 2,200 views, the second has 1,800. Not a huge discrepancy. And yeah, it was definitely like a fascinating thing to go and read it myself, because actually having the context and like, okay, how does all this fit together? What is this actually about? Because I'd only ever known it through just these weird random screenshots and stuff like that from the comic, and just basically hearsay about it. So actually going through it myself and learning about it and reading it and actually trying to figure out what the fuck is supposed to be happening it was fun. It was a frustrating experience in many ways, because like, oh my god, it's a mess. But there's a lot of really interesting stuff to touch on. Like, I mean, the time it was created in, like Japanese, like Brazilian, like manga, like the influences that manga had in Brazil in the 90s, the way that it was made with like this volunteer work, all of the cultural references that were thrown in, all the political stuff that was thrown in. Very educational for me in many ways. I learned about, like the Conquistadors, and that was like that was actually really fascinating. I'm surprised I'd never heard of that. Like, that's not I don't know how big like the Brazilian population is in the US, but that is like not a very well known thing, and it's weird because it feels like obvious. It feels like, how the fuck has there not been like a big movie about this or something like that? and I know that there have been movies and shows, and there's been stuff in Brazil, but like, I don't know what that stuff's like real exposure outside of the country is. I'm like, how have I never heard of this at all? Like, this seems so obvious to adapt into a story. It's so cool. And I got some comments from like Brazilian viewers who I was like okay, I tried to be, I don't know, respectful, or I tried to understand sort of the Brazilian perspective a little bit of what was going on. I didn't want to be condescending or anything towards it, which I think it would be really easy to when you're looking at something this like scrappy and it's so easy, I feel like, from an American perspective, to just look at like everything south of us and think of it as just this like fucking poverty land. But I wanted to avoid any kind of like, I don't know, anything that even kind of like resembled that. I tried to be like, I have a surprising number of Hispanic viewers, and I think that's something that's kind of weird but kind of cool. And I sort of kind of wanted to think about like, I don't know, I wanted to just have I wanted to like make fun of the book but be respectful to Brazilian culture, and especially like what I learned about it, and I hope that's what I was able to accomplish. And from the comments, I think I got a comment that, they were like, hey, you actually explained the Cangaceiro thing really well. And I was like, very proud of that, actually, because I just learned about it when I was researching for the video. So the fact that I was able to describe it decently and hopefully impart to like maybe a non-Brazilian audience or someone who doesn't know about it, that like, hey, this is a cool thing. This is a cool part of Brazilian history. Yeah, so like what was also funny is the amount of comments I got from Brazilian people who had never heard of this and unfortunately who were maybe like felt ashamed of it. If you're Brazilian and you learned about it, don't be ashamed. Do not be ashamed. First of all, I really appreciate that book for what it is, and I think in the second part I tried to get that across in my kind of concluding thoughts. I tried to express like my appreciation for what I thought it represented. But like there is just as much shitty, embarrassing American shit. Like, do not fucking, if you see something like, obviously, like, I know it's probably different because if your country doesn't have a lot of like exposure outside, like internationally, being famous for something that's like, or being well known for something that's like bad, I can see that. I can see that, but I don't know. That's another reason that I wanted to try and be respectful to the culture. Was for that reason. Like, I don't want to just bring up a different culture entirely and just like to mock it or anything like that. And I try to avoid anything like that. This was also a cool moment where I got to work with Gus, who you probably recognize if you read the comments a lot on this podcast. Fairly frequent commenter and fan of the channel. And I think I mentioned it was like frequent Cellarcast viewer or something like that in the video, who reached out to me a little while ago, and so we were just like in touch, I guess. And I looked at, because someone left a comment about, I explained this at the start of the second video, but someone left a comment about how all the author's notes or the writer's notes or the editor's notes, something like that, where they go like full xenophobia, I think was the words he used. And I was like, oh, well, now I'm curious. Racism? And so like yeah, I mean the notes were not translated for some reason by the translation group, so I reached out to Gus. I was like, hey, would you mind helping me out with like translating this thing? Because I don't think it's ever been translated. And he was like very, very happy to help. Shout outs to Gus. Got back to me within like a day or two, something like that, with like the whole thing translated. And he was nice enough to include like annotations to explain certain references and things like that, and basically translator's notes. So awesome job by him. Big shout outs, and I think it led to some great moments. and a lot of interesting backstory, and it really helped fill out some of the information about the creators of that book, like Pereira and Peixoto. That was great. I really enjoyed these two videos. I thought they were. I think I really nailed a lot of the comedic timing. I think I nailed like the weird matching. Like when you get to issue 4, and it's just this bizarre tone shift. I think I actually communicated that like it gets so dark, and I feel like that comes across in the editing a lot, and I think I did that. I think I executed that pretty well. I'm pleased with how I was able to do that. And then, the second part, probably just more of that. It was just more of describing my confusion and stuff like that. And I do appreciate what the comic represents as just this like this very like indie publication is what it feels like, and it's cool. Ended up being a lot longer in total. I mean, God, if I put both these videos together, it's like over an hour, like an hour and it's like feature length practically. It's like I made a movie. On this, and I enjoyed it. That's pretty much what I had to say for that. It was a fun romp. I liked expressing my love of Megaman. Next was the first viral Let's Play a Sham. So the first funny thing that a lot of people noticed about this, so I filmed this video entirely naked, and the reason for that is because I just kind of film in whatever I'm wearing at the time when I decide to film, and it just so happened that it was like the summer, and I was just out of the shower, and it was really hot, and I just didn't want to put clothes on, so I just sat down and I was like, I feel like you can see my hair is wet in this video. So I was like, I should get around to recording. So that's why and so literally I got these comments about like my steamy shoulders or whatever. And, honestly, this was not like a thirst trap, as they call it. That was not an attempt at that at all. It was literally, I sat down, I looked at how I appeared on the camera, and I saw that, it was really just like shoulders up. Yeah, it's fine. And, I just fucking recorded, and I just didn't really think anything of it. I'm like, okay, it's not, you can't see like my nipples or anything like that. Yeah, this is like an acceptable level of nudity. And then I edited the whole video. And then like I put it up, and I didn't really think anything of it, and I just got these comments, and I looked back and I was like, oh, I do kind of I don't look too bad from just the shoulders. If you saw my whole body, shirtless at least, much less impressive. But much less impressive. But hey, from the shoulders up, maybe I should start wearing like tube tops. I don't look too bad. But not the intention. The intention was not to be seductive in this at all. And yes, I did feel like, I think Prox one time was like, so why did you like, I saw one video of yours where you were like shirtless. And I was like, oh, oops. So funny thing about this video in general, this started as I wanted to make a video about weird Mario ROM hacks. Because I read on the r/ROMs, I believe, subreddit, someone made a post about Super Mario Brothers frustration and how little information there is on it. Excuse me. Like the hack itself. Excuse me. Which technically the hack is called Super Mario Brothers Forever, but it's been known as frustration because of the video, and it will sometimes be called that. So I wanted to like do some research into like who made it, where does it come from, and I legitimately just could not find anything. nothing in English or nothing that I could even like trace that might have been in another language. It was just basically a total dead end. And I ended up just kind of watching the video, and I sort of like looked into, how did I even find out about, oh yeah, I was watching it and I noticed these weird little inconsistencies in the editing, like parts where it looks like it's been cut. And I was like, this looks edited, but the voiceover does not sound edited. It seems like the video and the audio are different, like it's not his footage or something. And then I did some more digging, and I found out that yes, in fact, it was, it wasn't his footage. It was not a real Let's Play. It was this footage he took from, I think, Nico Nico, something like that, or no, it was like a Chinese website. And what was it called? I think it's linked in the sources. Yeah, I can't. Tudo. Tuduo. Sorry, Tuduo. I think I call it Tudo. And yeah, that was I just thought it was like I remember watching this video forever, like when I was a kid, like when I was 9 or something, watching that video. And honestly, I never really found it very funny, even as a kid, but it was interesting. It was sort of intriguing as to like, well, what is this? Because I didn't know what ROM hacks were. And I kind of tried to break down that feeling in the video, like why it took off so much, and like the novelty, like this was so early in like a really interconnected internet that a lot of people just didn't know about ROM hacks, or it was this very, you would look at it and you'd be like, what the fuck is this? This is like a Mario game, but it's all messed up and weird, and the idea of game modding was very obscure, so I can imagine this sort of mystery of what this thing even is would be very intriguing, and like the further that he gets, well, he quote unquote gets in the game, the more you of this weird version of Mario you get to see. And then also just this was 2008, so really early, which is technically post Angry Video Game Nerd, but a lot of people were not familiar with that style. Like the idea of someone just sitting down, recording themselves playing a game and getting really mad and just riffing was such a novelty at the time, and it was so different. It was novel, and yeah, I thought there were enough things. The video did not do very well. I like it. I think it's a decent video, just as like a small scale thing. And then I think like just sort of the relationship that Kevin has with it, where it's one of those things that's funny because it's like there's so many people who just want him to like make another one. Why didn't he ever make another one? Like the truth is, he never really liked doing it. His if he wanted to do comedy and like art kind of performance stuff, it was more in like sketch comedy. Like that was his real passion. And I mean, the truth is that like if he did another one, I don't think he would enjoy it, and I think that it would probably show through in it, probably. If he just felt obligated to make another one, it's like, what is he gonna do? The bit gets old by like half. The video is just too long. Like the bit gets old halfway through for me at least, and I'm like, okay, he's gonna swear, he's gonna. It's like listening to Justin Roiland improv for too long, and you're like, okay, all right, yeah, you're gonna say fuck and poop and shit. And there's just not a lot of substance beyond the novelty, and I think that's it's one of those things. I don't think it's aged particularly well, but it's an interesting time capsule, and there's a lot of stuff you can glean from it. And honestly, good for Kevin, because it's just such a minor note. It's one of those funny things about like the internet and art and stuff like that, which is that this was just a one-off thing. He pretty much just recorded in like an hour. So I think he had to like retake something or something like that. He did this in like basically an afternoon. He put this thing together, and it ended up becoming this gigantic thing. And like the amount of effort he put in was not did not correlate to how much popularity it got. And like, you might care about it, but he really doesn't. Like, he really does not care much for that video. And honestly, he just got really sick of it from that podcast interview. He got really sick of it a few years later. but people just kept bringing it up. And like his real passion, like what his life is really about, is fucking astrophysics and stars. And you go watch any of his things on, like, I dipped in and I kind of skimmed through his like beginner's guide to stargazing and stuff like that. And this dude loves space. He loves just talking about space and explaining it and making it fun and interesting for people and appreciating the night sky and the planets. He works on the fucking James Webb telescope. And it's like, he's way happier, I'm sure, doing what he's doing now compared to if he was stuck making a million Super Mario Brothers frustrations that he didn't have any passion for. So kind of an interesting video. Lost Age of NES. This was one that I wanted to do for a while because it's a topic that I'd always known about. Like I always had it in my mind that, like, oh yeah, the back half of the NES catalog is really interesting. Like the games were like, there was a lot more like refinement of games. People kind of knew how to make them a little better. Like, it's really hard to know how to make games when there aren't that many big examples or ones that you don't have access to. But by the time of, like, the later 80s, people had kind of, like, the people who were more astute and a little more perceptive and seemed to, like, really understand be a little more on the ball about games as a craft, were really, like, figuring out, like, okay, how do you make a game that's interesting? And some of those games, like, Samson, oh gosh, Samson's Quest? Little Samson. Little Samson, like, that game feels like, that almost feels like a game that could have been made now. That game has aged very well in a lot of ways, especially design-wise. Obviously some hang-ups that I had with it that I think are just a little too punishing, a little too archaic, like the saves continue system. Archaic in a way I don't like. But in other ways, and in many other ways, I think overall it's actually a very outstanding game and definitely worth going back to. And so I was always aware of stuff like this, of like, oh yeah, the back half of the NES catalog has some really real hidden gems in it. But for some reason I never had the idea to make a video on it until then. I was like, I want to make a video on, like, late era NES games. And I love the title, The Lost Age of NES. So, excuse me. So because my main experience with that was actually, like, Mega Man 6. Mega Man 6 is my favorite game in the classic series. And when you look at, like, like, visually what they were able to do with the hardware in 6 compared to, like, Mega Man 1, it's like night and day. 6 has such an atmosphere. It's got such a vibe. So many beautiful... I fucking love the sunset. I use that as an example. The sunset in Mega Man 6 is just gorgeous in Tomahawk Man's stage. Just, like, they really knew how to squeeze all the power out of that machine. Also, I believe there were updates to, like, NES cartridges that allowed for some more memory, which also contributed, but I think the point still stands that, like, they were really comfortable with the hardware. A lot of consoles, like, a lot of their most interesting stuff comes in the later years, because developers know how to get more out of it and use the system in new kind of ways. So, like, this was mainly focused on games that were released after the Super Nintendo. That was what I considered the late era. So Little Samson. Yeah, I wanted to bring this up. I don't pick games because there's like a couple, like, when I start talking about individual games, because, the next couple of videos, it's like, there's the DOS horror games, there's the Killer Bass, those Urban Yeti. I don't pick games. I want to, like, get this on the record. I don't pick games that I know I'm not going to like. I don't ever go into a game, like, if I want to make a video about a game or about a topic where I'm going to be discussing a game, reviewing it, sort of, I don't ever pick a game that I think I'm going to dislike. I never aim to have a negative experience. I look for topics that are interesting to me. And if I think a game looks interesting, I want to talk about it. It just so happens that a lot of times experiments fail. That, like, things that are going for something different don't quite have it figured out yet. So a lot of times, like, yeah, I mean, you know, I just picked a couple games at random, basically. Stuff that looked vaguely, you know, kind of interesting to me. Like, okay, I looked at, like, a lot of lists and stuff like that of, like, okay, maybe what should I be looking at? I actually looked at lists of some of the best games. Or, like, noteworthy games or something like that. And, so I was trying to aim for stuff that was cool because I wanted to show off the cool parts of the catalog. At the same time, I only have so much time to make the video, so I can't go through, like, 20 different games to give them an assessment each and then, like, you know, figure out which one I'm going to make the video about. I kind of have to commit. So I committed to basically Little Samson, Cliffhanger, and Zen. And unfortunately, Little Samson I had overall positive thoughts on. Cliffhanger I had very mixed thoughts on. It's a very janky game. I don't know why I picked it. I genuinely could not justify that to you. And then Zen is a fucking trash fire. Wow, what a poorly made game. It's like Zen is like the game equivalent of, like, a Baz Luhrmann's Moulin Rouge. Was that what I used when we watched? Kat showed me Moulin Rouge, the movie, and I was like, wow, this fucking sucks. Zen is, yeah. All of my criticisms of Zen, I still stand by. It's a game that's going for, like, it's variety over depth. And the variety, but the variety is not well executed in my opinion because the game is too short. It's a shallow game. Someone used that word in the comments. It's a shallow game. And that's the main problem with it, as opposed to Urban Yeti, where it's like basically like a mini game collection that's just has all these pieces of connective tissue of these overworld segments. The mini games in Urban Yeti are like just deep enough for what they need to be. Like, it's a simple, straightforward gameplay concept. You're going to play a little ice hockey game. You are going to play tap out. You're going to go down this river. You're going to pick up chickens and throw them into a fucking meat grinder. Simple ideas that are executed, for the most part, fine. Well, okay. In Urban Yeti, it's more specifically that... Well, I'll get into it when I talk about Urban Yeti. But like, broadly, like, I think it works better in that game because the concepts are simpler. Zen is trying to go for, like... This is like a completely new style of gameplay that you're switching between. And that would be fine. I think it's cool for a game to, like, switch between... I love Nier Automata. That's, like... I don't know if I put it on my favorite games list, but it's up there, right? It's high up in my opinion of it. Nier Automata has lots of different weird gameplay changes, and I think that game is fantastic. One thing that helps it is that it has the length to actually give each style the time it needs for you to understand it, ease you into it, kind of learn it, and then it starts, developing it out. Zen just throws you into the fucking blender, puts you into these, like, high-stakes, instant death, trial and error sequences that just sucks so much ass because it's so short. It's just these short, like the freaking acid rain level that's like a randomly, okay, now it's a 2D side scroller, and there's like 100 different mechanics. There's like this enemy that has this sort of complex, like, 2-part pattern, because when it's a cloud and then you break the cloud and then it turns into like it shoots lightning down. And then you have to, like, keep the flowers up, but then you have to fight the boss, and there's, like, these rail climbing mechanics, and there's these, like, trampoline things to bounce you upward. There's like, this meter of the flowers going. There's so much fucking shit going on, and it just throws you into it. And then a lot of those things never come back up again. They never come back. There's no like level leading up to it where like, oh, you got to keep the flowers alive. Oh, here's this enemy that's introduced to you, and then kind of like, you know, do some very basic like 4-panel development type thing. Go watch my video on Mega Man 2, like my second video I ever made, if you want to know what that is. The Kishio Tenketsu kind of style of like game design. Yeah, it's just a mess. It just ends up being frustrating and unfun. And what's funny is that like, man, people's nostalgia is ridiculous. Because I went to like go look at comments when I would look up at like walkthroughs for a couple segments. It's like, how the fuck, like, how do I beat that clone character? And it turns out that like I just used the turbo button, or no, oh, there's like the fucking move the game never tells you have where you can poke your staff out and then flip him over you. Okay. That you just have to know that you can do that when the game gives you like almost no opportunity to do so. It's like, I can't even think of that many sequences in the game where there are enemies you can do that to. That might be the only one, legitimately the only one, in the side-scrolling style. And I just look at these comments from these people who played this game as a kid, and they're like, wow, this is one of the best games on the NES. And I'm like, holy shit, nostalgia. Nostalgia is like a drug, dude. This game is a fucking disaster. Like, it sucks. But because you played it as a kid and it wowed you with all the variety, it's like all flash pretty much with no depth at all. Like, there's just it's such a thin game. Man, like, that was really eye-opening. I almost want to do like a different, but I was a little like, I was getting to the end of the script and I was like kind of annoyed. I was like, ugh. You know, it kind of sucks that like 2 of the 3 games that I'm talking about are kind of bad, right? But they're more negative than positive. So that's why I wanted to end that off with just a lightning round. That's why that's in there of just like, hey, here's some fucking badass late era NES games. Oh yeah, the whole story of Zen is really weird, of like the creator and how he just tried to make it a thing for so many years, and he basically just conned his way into getting deals and stuff like that. So I want to talk about, you know, other games that were like cool, like Shatterhand, that game rules. Metal Storm, that game rules. Clash at Demon Head is badass. What else did I talk about? Oh yeah, I think Wario's Woods or something like that. Very cool. Just like, those are some cool games that I would legitimately check out. I would highly recommend any of those. Very like exceptional little hidden gems. Yeah, I love the thumbnail I made for it too. I love the visual of Mega Man sliding down the timeline and like Roll and Rush following him. That's a great thumbnail, I think. Divine Cybermancy. Holy shit! I've already talked at length about this game. I don't even want to like devote, because I'm already gone for like 2 hours. I don't even want to devote too much time to it. But oh boy, Divine Cybermancy. Again, I want to say that like I did not go into this game wanting to dislike it. I went into it knowing that it was weird and different and interesting. And I wanted to see stuff like that. I like expanding my knowledge of video games, and seeing weird experimental stuff is cool to me. I still stand... Okay, I haven't gone back to replay it, but at least in my... I plan to at some point, because I really want to get it. Like, maybe in the same way that I kind of get Star Wars Galaxies a little more, I really want to get it. Yeah, it's hard to talk about it because there's so much. One thing I'll talk about with is that the reason it's so long. I was talking to like my dad about how long it's like the longest video I'd ever made when it came out, and then the Senate hearing video passed that one up. And he was like, why not just make it a 2-parter? And like, one, again, like the drop off is severe. I couldn't find a great place to like really split the video up. And also, I think like as a piece of art that I wanted to make, I think it's necessary that the video itself is long. That it feels like when you're at the end of the video, like you've just fucking gone on a journey. Because there is so much to talk about with that game. It's so ambitious. It's going for so many things from a gameplay standpoint. There's so much going on. From a story standpoint, there's so much happening. There's so much to dig into, and so much of it is vague and abstract, and you really have to step back, and it's this gigantic picture. It's this gigantic picture that you have to really, like, I did not understand so many parts of the game until I was done with it. And I could, like, reflect and read other people's thoughts on it. And I think that for that kind of a feeling, like, I want the viewer to, I want the sheer enormity of that game to be expressed through the length of the video itself. If this was like a 10-minute video, I don't think it properly communicates how I feel about it. It doesn't communicate that sensation I got of like, this game is huge. It is just this sprawling work. And that's why, like, and I had a lot to say about it, you know? I had a lot to say about everything. I a lot more than I thought I would going in. And, yeah, that's part of the length. I was very happy with how, like, I really like the metaphor that I was able to come up with for it, which was French shoegaze cyberpunk. I loved comparing it to shoegaze music. If you haven't watched that video, I would recommend it. I'm still pretty pleased with how it came out. Shoegaze is this genre of... It came from the UK. It was kind of like a post... it sort of comes from, like... How do I describe it? Would be post-punk. I think is where it sort of originates from. Parent genres: indie rock, alt rock, ambient music, space rock, neo-psychedelia, electronics, and rock music. Yeah, it kind of comes from, like, it was sort of a it came from, like, the UK and Ireland, and it takes out off of that sort of... There's essentially, like, a lot it's like a subgenre of rock, basically, that is, let's see. Oh, here's a great quote about it from Wikipedia. The genre was typically, quote, overwhelmingly loud, with long, droning riffs, waves of distortion, and cascades of feedback. Vocals and melodies disappeared into the walls of guitars. It's like this that wash of sound, where no instrument is distinguishable from another. So, like, shoegaze, I really enjoy shoegaze. I really love the Cocteau Twins, whose music I used in that video. Slowdive is another great shoegaze band. I'm also a big fan of Drop 19s, which is actually an American shoegaze band. They have some really cool music. Goes into, like, Winona is a good song by them. That's a little, like, shorter and a little more easy to just listen to in one go. Shoegaze as a genre is, like, interesting because it's like this wall of sound where there's so much... The reason it's called shoegaze is because the instrumentalists had so many, like, effects pedals that while they were performing on stage, they were constantly looking down. So they were always, you know, gazing at their shoes. So, it's this genre that's really defined by, like, there's so much going on. There's just lots of noise and stuff happening. And, like, you can kind of let yourself get overwhelmed by it and sort of just let everything sort of equalize out, including the vocals. A lot of shoegaze vocals end up being this weird sort of gibberish that's hard to distinguish from the sound itself of just, like, the instrumentals. I think there's a lot of... In my mind, there's a lot of, like, instrumentals, or there's a lot of shoegaze music where the vocals are almost meant to be less of, like, there's less meaning in the words, as much as the words are supposed to evoke emotion in you, and almost in the same way that the instrumental is. The vocals are an instrument, kind of in the same way that the instruments are, where there's actually not so much of a language that you're supposed to understand part of it. And what I like about the genre is that it gives my brain a lot to like kind of think on, because you listen to it, and again, you can get overwhelmed by it, and you can just kind of take in the whole thing at once. But you can also listen to it, and because it also tends to be very kind of chilled out. It's not very aggressive music, is what's interesting. It's ambient in many ways, despite how noisy it is. And you can kind of pick out specific instruments and lines and things happening in the song, and you can just kind of listen to that progress over the course of it. And there's a lot going on, and I think that it was a great metaphor for as a game, because there's so much happening, and it's so easy to be overwhelmed by all of the gameplay systems, all this random plot information and lore that's just being dumped on you and giving you a freaking headache. Not that shoegaze gives you a headache, but that well, it might. If you're like really sensitive or something, but and like if you take it all at once, it's this just like what like you can't even comprehend it pretty much. But you kind of look at these pieces in isolation. You look at these systems, like how is this supposed to interact with this? And there's so many things weaving in and out, like the way that the multiplayer, like the co-op interacts with like the class system, the stat system, where you can like spec into different stats with almost to play like a different class. And the way that like the co-op system almost clashes with the way the story is presented. The story feels like this single player experience. You know, if you're playing multiplayer, only one person can see the cutscenes. Well, the cutscenes, I say, they're just really just dialogue. And just all these things going on and crossing over and contradicting, and you look at them, and I felt it was just such a good comparison to make. Go listen to shoegaze. It's a really cool genre. It didn't really take off as much. It was kind of this actually growing thing in the early 90s, and then it got fucking wiped out by grunge music. It got Nirvana fucking destroyed shoegaze's momentum. It just became the new thing. But shoegaze is really cool. I feel like it's one of those genres that like a lot of people are not familiar with, but I think would really enjoy, actually. I would recommend like actually any of the songs that so the song that I used in the intro of that I Divine Cybermancy was Frou Frou Foxes in Midsummer Fires by the Cocteau Twins. I'd also recommend like a great song is When the Sun Hits by Slowdive. That's a great song. And then I guess Winona by Drop 19s. Those are ones that I would play to like, okay, here's kind of like a little more, I guess if you had to pick like a single, you know, those would be it. I'm pretty sure those were singles. Yeah, so go listen to that. That's my recommendation. Go listen to shoegaze. Oh, My Bloody Valentine. That's another one. Yeah, My Bloody Valentine. Go listen to When You Sleep by My Bloody Valentine. That song is such a strong vibe to it. Oh, it's so good. This was More DOS Horror. So this was a sequel to a video that I originally made back in like last summer, or the summer before, and I like DOS games. I like the feeling of DOS games. This sort of the vibe, I guess. It's like its own unique aesthetic. I mean, my whole channel's aesthetic is built around DOS, literally, the CGA color scheme. This is another example I want to bring up that, like, I don't go into horror games wanting to dislike them. It just so happens that I think that there were some problems with the ones that I chose to look at. I think I did give props. I give props where I feel like I never want to be negative, right? I never want to make something look bad if I don't actually think it's bad. I don't want to skew something. I don't just want to make fun of it cruelly. I don't want to be cruel when I talk about games. I want to be fair. And if I think that something is good, I want to talk about it and I want to give it props. So everything there I do back up and I do believe. I think someone made like one comment. It's like the odd negative comment that I get that that like makes me fucking freak out. which is that I spent too long talking about my blue light filter. I spent that long time about the blue light filter, and how much it affected my because it affected my enjoyment of the romantic blue a lot. Like it's and it was a big deal for me, which is why I spend so much time harping on it. I realized that like if you don't have that same issue, it might come off as very repetitive and like just like a momentum killer for the video. I get that, and maybe I would have cut it down a little bit if I could do it again. But the reason it's in there is because I wanted to express how, and especially the sequence of me recording my screen. Like I think you can really tell, like, yeah, that game is like unplayable with my filter on. I got some questions about like, oh, does that like, I think someone was surprised at someone at my age would have eye strain problems. It's really not an age thing, and actually, when I was in high school, blue light filters became very popular amongst my peers. I think a lot of young people use them now, because it became much more common knowledge that like blue light kind of keeps you up. There's a lot of teenagers with bad sleep schedules, and that's why I initially started using it. And then I kind of just figured out that like, oh, I actually just really like, it just causes my eyes less strain over time. It's much more comfortable, especially for me, who's like I sit and I look at a computer all day for my job, so, and for my leisure and stuff like that, and so for me it's very key, and it's very important to just my comfort. And when that's also why like it's really funny, but like, so my phone, I use a different intensity of blue light filter on it. I went back and I rewatched that video on my phone. And the first part where I'm talking about Last Half of Darkness and how hard the text parser is to see, I look at it on my phone, I'm like, what the fuck is this guy talking about? Because it's so easy to see. But on mine, because I used a much more intense one on my PC monitor, it's like impossible. It's like really difficult to see. I could not make it out at first. So that's why that part might seem kind of weird. I hope it makes sense, like, you know, once you get to the part where I talk about the romantic blue and my filter and all that, but yeah, eye strain is like a much more well-known thing. And it's not a youth thing at all, or it's not like a thing that gets worse with age. It's literally just how much you use a screen. Blue light can just affect you in terms of eye strain. There was a trend. It's not as popular anymore, but back in like the mid 2010s, gunners were really popular. The yellow tinted glasses, which were basically like blue light filter glasses essentially, and that was really popular amongst the gamers. That was like part of the MLG. The MLG aesthetic was that you got your gamer headset, not as many gamer chairs honestly, but your gamer headset, you got the Doritos, the Mountain Dew, the gunners, you're playing Call of Duty, MLG. That was part of that whole look, basically, was the gunners, because they would just sit and fucking look at a screen all day. Yeah, so anything else to say on this video in particular? I think I was a little more mixed on this one, like in terms of the games that I covered. I think the first video I did was a little more positive. But I liked the variety of games I was able to cover. A lot of them ended up being text adventures, but I appreciate it. And I'm glad that I exposed some people who were like, oh, wow, this is really cool. Like, I never knew about any of this stuff. Like, I really enjoy just, you know, educating people or giving them, what the fuck am I trying to say? Informing them of something that they found interesting that they never would have even thought of to look into before. That's a cool feeling. Yeah, that video also did pretty well, like really good for my channel randomly. Immediately followed up by a video that did not do well. Killer Bass. This was just kind of a light, just sort of fun video. I found out about this from like Twitter forever ago. And I don't know, it's one of those curiosities, like a fishing horror game on the PS1. How strange. And yeah, I did not enjoy it. I think it has a lot of just awkwardness and weirdness and just, I don't want to play it. Yeah, I don't know. The aesthetic, I think, is what makes it interesting. Yeah, honestly, not too much to say about this one. It's just kind of a weird game. This fish eats babies. I love that title. I guess I don't really count the Hound audiobook. The violence hearings were, oh my god, this one, I thought this was going to be like a 40-minute video at most. It ended up being like almost an hour and a half. It's like literally feature length. This one was like, yeah, this was a case, the inspiration from this came from me wanting to, I'd always known, this is just one of those events that, like, if you know enough about game history, like, oh yeah, the video game violence hearings from 93 with Mortal Kombat and Night Trap and all that, and Senator Lieberman holding the goofy little baby blue pistol, and, sorry, it's a revolver. And, but I looked at, I realized, like, no one's ever done a real deep dive on this, and I think that's one of my strong suits, and appeals as a channel, is that one of the things that I think that maybe sets me apart a little bit is that I go way deeper and way more analytical on topics that are, like, kind of obscure, like, you know, I think I really tapped into that when I made, like, that Konami E3 video, which a lot of people found my channel through, and, like, that was the same like inspiration, pretty much, was like, well, actually, specifically, there was a comment about, like, where are they now? I think I've explained that I got literally inspired by a comment on the Krobcat video on that press conference to make a where are they now on that. But I think the appeal of that part of it that I sort of tapped into was that no one, like, yeah, you could see these funny moments in these compilations, but no one had really done a deep dive into that press conference and what happened. And uncovering the mystery, I think, was really fascinating for a lot of people. And I think that's something that I kind of do well at. I think that's like a strength of mine, that I love doing research and I love digging into stuff. And with, like, the violence hearings, this was another thing that's like, well, a lot of people know about this. A lot of people have seen the clips and this and that, and people vaguely know about what this is. And there's that video of, like, the highlights, essentially, but it's like a 40-minute video, whereas, you know, the hearing itself is like 2 hours and 40 minutes, something like that. And there's like no one had actually taken the work to, like, go in and actually listen to the whole thing and take notes and analyze it and talk about it and kind of try to explain what was happening. And I think what I do is try to put a little comedic spin where I can. I think that was part of the also some of the what I think was appealing about the DieHard series was that all of that information that I displayed, or that was in the DieHard series, it's all publicly available, technically. Like, if you wanted to, you could just go read the entire, like, every single source that I provided, listen to every podcast, read every, you know, magazine, read every random obscure forum, go to every archived website of someone who used to work there, like Kevin DeZelm's website. I had to, like, fucking find archives of it from, like, 2002. You could do all of that, but what I think my value is, and the value that I added to it, was that number one, I did all that myself, and I put in the work to do that, and put it together, and put it into a script that presented it, and then presented that information in a way that I thought was, or I tried to make engaging, and relay something a little, kind of emotional, and a little what I thought was special about it, and add sort of my perspective on it. Hopefully without coloring it too much. But I think that like the hearing is sort of another example of that, of like, well, just a lot of people don't want to actually go through and analyze, like, well, what kind of arguments do they use? What are they talking about? What's going on? What sort of evidence is brought up? What are some of the funny little moments, like all these this secret political Cold War that's going on between Bill White and Howard Lincoln. Because I love they're sitting right next to each other too. And like and then the whole story of Joseph Lieberman and what he did afterwards was so fucking. I love adding stuff like that. That's just, like, hey, this technically doesn't relate too much to the main topic, but like, when else am I want to talk about this? When else am I going to talk about Joseph Lieberman's insane, like, party nonsense? His fake political party. Yeah, I think I've said pretty much everything I wanted to say. I had a lot of fun making that video. Until the end, where I had to, like, I described this before on the podcast, but when I had to go in and, do all this, basically re-edit like 80% of it because of issues with this and that, and you can go listen to one of the previous podcasts I did. I think the one I did with Prox, the most recent one. By that time, there was a point where I was just fucking sick of listening to, like, Byron Dorgan talk, and I'm like, God, shut the fuck up. It goes from, like, being amused to, like, shut the fuck up. Yeah. And then, I guess finally, to wrap this up, that's pretty much all I have to say about, that video. That I didn't say in the video. In the video itself. Urban Yeti, too hot for store shelves. Urban Yeti. So the way that I found Urban Yeti was actually Kat showed me the sewer music. Yeah, sorry guys, sorry to spoil the magic, but no. Me playing the game was not the first time. My reaction in the video that I recorded was not actually my initial reaction to the sewer music. It was a recreation of the emotions that I wanted you to feel. That I kind of felt. Because, oh my god, it's terrible. Kat showed me the sewer music, and then she kept making a joke about, like, how I should make a video about Urban Yeti. And I just kind of, like, went the whole... That was, like, a couple months ago. Honestly, a couple weeks before I even made it. And she kind of forgot about it, and then I was thinking about, like, I want to make one more video in December. I want to get one more video out. Oh yeah, this was also, like, in the middle... when did I start? Yeah, so after October, I sort of made the decision that I was going to not stick to a strict 2-video-a-month schedule, because the DOS horror video was, like, very stressful for me to make. Because it ended up being a lot longer than I thought it would be, and I wanted to get the audiobook out, and it was a lot. And I was like, okay, how many... Because I wanted to get 2 videos out. DOS Horror ended up taking too long. It took like 2.5 to 3 weeks as opposed to 2 weeks. And then I wanted to get a second video out, but I was like, oh god, what do I do? And I have to get this audiobook thing out. And it was just... I was very stressed out. And I figured, like, okay, the people who give me money on Patreon, my subscribers on Patreon, are probably not looking at it in the same way that I do, of like, one video is this much money. They probably just want to give me money because they like the videos that I make, and as long as I put videos out on a somewhat consistent basis, I think that they're okay with that. And I didn't get I put out a post asking about it. No one said anything, on Patreon. I sent out a post just for my patrons, and no one said anything. No one responded to it. And I was like, I guess I'll just switch. I guess I will switch my schedule then, because it doesn't seem like anyone has any objections. And it's been a lot easier. And I think I'm still able to get out pretty consistent quality content. Because, like, okay, I made, like, one video in November. And then... or no, did I even put out a video in November? That was December 12th, and the video before that was... Oh my god, yeah. I did not make a video in November. Because the fucking violence hearings took 4 weeks to make. Yeah, that video took forever. Can you tell? It's an hour and 24 minutes. And I was like, okay, I want to give this video the time that it needs to make the video that I think as good as it can be, basically. And I think that if I'm at least putting something out, I have succeeded. I have succeeded in like at least delivering what my patrons are expecting. I still try to put pressure on myself to like make stuff, but I just didn't want it to be as like I was so stressed, and it was entirely self-imposed, just a thing. So I kind of wanted to give myself a little more leeway. So I wanted to make another video and get it out before December was over, and I wanted it to just be a low intensity video. And honestly, you might be looking at Urban Yeti and being like, oh, it's like a 30-minute video. That seems like a lot of work. No, not really. It was actually a pretty like light work in terms of like recording, writing, editing. It was not a particularly difficult video to make. I got it done in about a week and a half, I want to say. And yeah, didn't run into any serious issues with like editing or anything like that. It was just, I just want to make a funny video on a game that is sort of, well, you know, it's a Yeti. It's like a sort of snowy themed. Like you think of a Yeti and you think of like a Yeti, like a snow Sasquatch. Even though he's like urban and he's brown instead of white, like a Yeti should be. But, you know, whatever. The game does not have much of a winter theme, but I'm like, okay, Yeti, whatever, snow. And I am, I think it was a decent, tight little video. It's only been out for like less than 2 weeks. But I'm glad with how it turned out at the end. Maybe I'll hate it in a month. I don't know if I really hate any of the videos that I've made. I specifically did not tell Kat what video I was making while it was in production. Because I wanted it to be a surprise. And I was like, hey, new video's up. And then like a minute later, I get a message from her back saying, what the fuck? I wanted to be a little surprised because she showed me the game. Oh boy. Yeah, I guess some closing thoughts. 2022, season 2 of the Cellar, I feel very good. Like I'm very happy with where I'm at creatively. I feel really happy with where my life at is in a lot of ways, to kind of like look back on the whole year. Like I feel a lot healthier mentally. Yeah, I mean, I feel good in a lot of ways. I guess I could, I'm really happy with the audience that I have. I guess if I had to ask for anything, it would be a bunch of subscribers. Because growth was very slow this year for the most part compared to last year. What I should say. Growth in 2022 was a lot slower compared to 21. I think I like jumped about 1,000 subscribers, whereas 21 was like 3,000 about. I remember ending 2021 with around 3,200, 3,300 subscribers, something like that. And yeah, so I think it would have been neat to get like hit 5,000, but honestly, like I can't complain. Like I'm really happy with where I'm at, like my videos. I think that like I'm really happy with what my audience is like. I think you guys have been really cool. For the most part, like I haven't had any big problems with any kind of weird, I don't know, you know, like you can build up like a weird sentiment in your audience, and if you kind of don't keep certain sorts of attitudes in check and certain behavior in check, but I haven't really had an issue. Maybe if I get bigger, if I grow a lot, it will become an issue, but I don't know. I think that I really like this little thing that we've got going on here, and it feels like a nice tight little community, I guess. I wish we had more in jokes, but that's just me. Yeah. I feel like this is the 2022 was the year that the channel really started coming into its own, and where I feel like a lot freer to like express myself creatively, and I'm fortunate enough to have an audience of people who respond to that. And, you know, I mean, I talked earlier about how it's really nice to feel understood. I don't know if I necessarily am understood, but by everyone who watches my videos. But I think that this is like a very, yeah. I think I'm doing something good. I'm very, yeah. I'm content with what's happening. Maybe I should be more focused on the grind or whatever, but. I don't know. I feel like it's just a matter of time, you know? I think we've got something good going on here. And I'm just sort of rambling now and sort of repeating myself. But hey, I mean, if you've watched this far, thank you so much. No comment review this time. Next week will be the comment review. I'll just take comments from probably the episode 80 and this episode, and I'll just talk about both of them, depending on if I get any questions and stuff. So, yeah, feel free to ask questions and stuff like that. But hey, oh yeah, what do I say? Please leave it in the form of a question, because I'm not just going to read your thoughts out loud. This has been not a mini-sode at all, actually. This has been our 2022 Season 2 of the Cellar recap. And it's been a blast. Thank you guys so much for a really cool second year. Goodbye.